Today's scripture reading comes from the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus left that place and went away to the district of Tyre and Sidon. Just then, a Canaanite woman from that region came out and started shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." But he did not answer her at all, and his disciples came in and urged him, saying, "Send her away. She keeps shouting after us." He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came and knelt before him, saying, "Lord, help me." He answered, "It is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." She said, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their masters' tables." Then Jesus answered her, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." And her daughter was healed instantly. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. The past week has highlighted two of the monstrous evils stalking our planet. The idea that one race is superior and the idea that one religion is superior. Two men, one in Virginia, one in Barcelona, used automobiles to kill and maim and terrorize. White supremacists slithered into Charlottesville to spew their venom at African Americans and Jews. When it was over, a young woman and two police officers were dead and dozens injured. A disciple of ISIS drove his van down a crowded pedestrian sidewalk, mowing down hundreds of people, killing 13. Both acts must be repudiated, not only for their violence, but for the ideology behind the acts. At their roots, both of these dogmas are essentially the same. People who look and think as we do are the chosen. And that bestows on us the right to destroy those who are different. It is ironic, or an act of the Spirit, that the lectionary has designated this particular passage from Matthew as today's lectionary reading. It is the most embarrassing passage in the entire New Testament because it reveals prejudice in Jesus. Now, to set the stage, Jesus has been butting heads with the Pharisees and the scribes. He's been exposing their hypocrisy. Jesus points out that they follow all of these scrupulous rituals to make sure everything they eat is pure. But then they go out and act cruelly toward others. He pulls his disciples aside and says, "It's not what goes into you that defiles, it's what comes out of you. If your heart is corrupt, then you are prone to acts of evil." Our text begins by informing us that after this tussle with the Pharisees, Jesus sets his sights on a new destination. But not just any location. Jesus trekked to a particular piece of turf, the region of Tyre and Sidon, present-day Syria. The first century audience understood the implications of this immediately. Jesus went to a place where the Jewish and Gentile people intermingled. It's where their boundaries cross over each other. New Testament scholar Warren Carter says this is a place of tension and prejudice. And then he points out that Jewish historian from the first century, Josephus, wrote that the people of Tyre are our bitterest enemies. Now, soon after Jesus and his disciples arrive in this contentious region, a Gentile woman steps across the boundary and confronts him. The scene is filled with tension because she is a Canaanite, which is shorthand for Gentile, foreigner, enemy. The woman begs, "Have mercy upon me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." Now, if this episode were to follow the storyline of every other healing story in the New Testament, Jesus would say something very compassionate, and the girl would be healed, and mother and daughter would go home. But this story is unlike any other story in the Gospels. After the Canaanite woman begs Jesus to heal her daughter, Jesus ignores her. The disciples say to Jesus, "Get rid of her." What is left unsaid, but is obvious, is get rid of her because she's a filthy Gentile. And Jesus appears to comply with their request. He says to the woman, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel." In other words, my mission's to the Jews, not Gentiles, so you might as well be on your way. However, this woman's desperate. She falls on her knees at the feet of Jesus. "Please, Lord, it's my daughter." And this is where the scene turns awkward. A mother is pleading for Jesus to heal her child, and Jesus not only doesn't honor her request, he insults her. He replies, "It's not fair to give the children's food to the dogs." Now, New Testament scholars have tripped all over themselves trying to take the sting out of those harsh words. One actually said, well, what Jesus was actually referring to were cuddly puppies. Please. However, there's no reason for us to soften the tone of this text. The gospel writer intends for it to be unseemly. The writer wants a question to arise in our minds. Was even Jesus prejudiced? As it turns out, this mother is not only desperate, she is clever. She responds to Jesus' insult by saying, "Yes, Lord, but even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table." She's down on her knees at his feet, right where the dogs would be. She's pleading, "Yes, Lord, just my daughter, please, just a few crumbs." And 1 second before a disciple steps forward and says, "Scram," Jesus says, "Great is your faith. Let it be done as you wish." And the daughter is healed. Now, one way of understanding this passage is to say that the woman partnered with God to teach Jesus a profound lesson. His mission was not to be restricted to his Jewish brothers and sisters. His mission was to everyone. Another way to understand this passage is that Jesus humbled himself in front of the disciples in order to set a trap for them. He knew their prejudice against Gentiles. He knew it was one of their unquestioned assumptions. And he was determined to expose it and show them a better way. This is the reason he took them to that region in the first place, a place where they were bound to encounter Gentiles. And that's why he did it immediately after teaching them that it's not what goes into you that defiles you, it's what comes out of you, such as bigotry. Later, when he would tell the story of the Good Samaritan, he would again puncture their prejudice by painting the outsider as the hero of the story. Then later, when he would give them a new commandment to love one another, they would finally understand this doesn't just mean love your Jewish brothers and sisters. This means to love everyone. Alan Zimmerman is the president of the congregation Beth Israel in Charlottesville, Virginia. Last Saturday morning, when members of their congregation gathered for worship, he stood outside next to the security guard that they had hired. For 30 minutes, 3 neo-Nazis dressed in fatigues, armed with assault rifles, stood across the street from them, glaring at them. Had they tried to enter the synagogue, Zimmerman says he has no idea what he would do. Several times while he was out there, parades of Nazis marched past their building, shouting, "There's the synagogue!" And the response would come back, "Sieg Heil!" Some carried flags. Many had swastikas and other Nazi signs. This is not Germany, 1939. This is the United States in 2017. A man in a white polo shirt kept walking back and forth, looking at the synagogue, casing the joint. He was maybe going to commit a crime, we don't know. Later, Zimmerman noticed that the man who drove that car into the crowd was wearing the same white polo shirt. And he assumed that that must be the uniform of one of the white supremacist groups. The Southern Poverty Law Center tracks hate groups around our nation. They have identified 4 such groups in Delaware: a neo-Nazi group, an anti-Muslim group, a black separatist group, and the Ku Klux Klan. For those of you who live in Pennsylvania, you will be unsettled to learn that they have identified in your state 40 hate groups. Across the country, they have identified 917 hate groups. Over the past year, I have come to realize how naive I have been. I have been spending way too much time with people like you. People who are well-educated and well-intentioned, good people. I had no idea there was so much malice in our nation. Either you believe God is the creator, or you believe this is all just an accident, and if so, then everyone can just make up the rules however they fit. The opening chapter of the first book of the Bible says human beings are created in God's image. Therefore, no race is superior. White supremacy is not only an insult to people of color, it is an affront to God, and it must be named for what it is. It is evil. Many forget that Jesus was not a Caucasian Christian. He was a Middle Eastern Jew. Neo-Nazis and white supremacists, he would be an anathema to them. They would not only have hounded him for his race and religion, they would have bid for the opportunity to drive the nails through his hands and feet. Our nation has an ugly history of racism. We still continue to struggle to embody the words of the Declaration of Independence that all people are created equal. We still struggle to embody the words of the Golden Rule that we are to treat others the way we want to be treated. We still struggle to embody the words of Jesus to love others as you love yourself. Tony McClure was a white racist. He tells about one of his co-founders of Life After Hate, a nonprofit group dedicated to helping people leave neo-Nazi and extremist groups. His colleague was being served at McDonald's one day by an elderly African-American woman. And as she was serving him, she noticed he had tattooed on his hand a swastika. And she looked at him and said, "Honey, you are so much better than that." And that seed germinated in him for several years, until he decided he had to leave the white nationalist movement. And he had to start helping other people leave the extremist groups as well. And that's the work he's dedicated himself to. McClure adds, "The hardest thing in the world is to show compassion to people who have no compassion." And then he says, "But those are the people who need it the most." McClure presents workshops, and invariably someone gets ruffled and says, "We need legislation, not compassion." McClure says there's room for both, but he prefers to talk about what he calls internal legislation. He says offering something beautiful is much more effective than simply criminalizing the ugly. Now, of course, changing people's minds is a very slow process. So I'm afraid our near future will see more violence. Having generated such a backlash against their actions in Charlottesville, and with more cities beginning to remove statues of Confederate soldiers from their grounds, I expect white supremacists are going to become more and more paranoid, and they will lash out with deadly force. I pray that I am wrong, but I'm afraid we are going to see more violence in the days ahead. I'm especially concerned about Richmond. Our daughter and grandchildren live there. And if you know Richmond, one of their main streets is Monument Avenue. And at every roundabout on Monument Avenue, there is a towering statue. Robert E. Lee, Jefferson Davis, Stonewall Jackson, and more. In the coming days, I suspect police forces will be pushed to the limit. I pray that they'll be able to limit the bloodshed. It would help if everyone who holds government office will clearly delineate between hate groups that espouse racism and anti-Semitism and counter-protesters who denounce their vile cause, rather than trying to draw some fuzzy equivalence between the two. In Charlottesville, white supremacists carried handguns, assault rifles, clubs, and metal poles. They wore helmets and riot vests. They made Nazi salutes, shouted racial slurs, and chanted, "Jews will not replace us," while marching like military troops. On some of the websites, they called for the burning of that synagogue. As for terrorism by ISIS and the like, the military will have to use force to halt its spread. But don't believe that terrorist ideology can be annihilated just by force. It can't be defeated simply on the battlefield. There must also be a battle for the hearts and the minds of those who somehow justify murdering innocents. So, what can you and I do? I've come up with 6 suggestions. Sorry, I couldn't stop with 3. Number 1, do not be hesitant to name terrorism for what it is: evil. Whether the terrorism is radical Islam or white supremacy, it is evil, and we must have the courage to say so. During the racial turmoil that set our country on edge during the Civil Rights Movement, Dr. King wrote, "History will have recorded that the greatest tragedy of this period of social transition was not the strident clamor of bad people, but the appalling silence of the good people." We must not be afraid to stand for what is right and true and good according to the gospel. 2, we must pray. Please do not nod your head and say, "Of course, this is one of those pious things the pastor has to say." I've noticed that people of faith, when asked to pray, will generally respond in one of 2 ways. One way, the person will pray to God to fix the situation and then excuse himself from any responsibility. The other is, the person will agree to pray, but will never really do it because they put prayer in the same category as wishful thinking. However, prayer enhances our reverence for people. Prayer can help us regain our awe and respect and thanks for our life, our own life, and for the life of others. Enhancing our reverence for others reminds us that others hurt like we do. They experience joy and setbacks like we do. They have hopes and dreams like we do. When prayer enhances our reverence for others, we begin to want the same good for them that we want for ourselves. And we also feel a moral responsibility to do something about it. 3, do not respond to hate groups with violence. Police may have to use force, but we do not. Violence confirms their belief that they are the victims and just gives them more aid to recruit more angry young men. 4, advocate for liberty and justice for all by working for the common good. Reject strategies that pit one group against another or seek personal good at the expense of others. Treating others the way we want to be treated creates a society where discrimination can be erased. 5, plant seeds. Plant seeds through acts and words of kindness and respect. God's Spirit can do amazing things from small seeds planted within people's hearts. Double down on your commitment to extend compassion to others. It will help you stand firm against hate without becoming hateful. And number 6, strengthen your friendships with people who come from the targeted groups, those that the hate groups are targeting. African Americans, Jews, Muslims, and the LGBT community. Those of us who are white Protestant Christians do not understand the fear of white hooded men marching through their neighborhoods. We don't understand the fear of neo-Nazis marching past their synagogues. We don't understand the fear of the media leaving the impression that all Muslims are just terrorists. Build ties with people of different races, different religions, and with members of the LGBT community. For people who commit themselves to following Jesus, indifference is not an option. To paraphrase the words of another, have we just adjusted our eyes to the darkness, or will we devote ourselves to spreading light?